and I'm really interested in hearing these gentlemen's opinions on the topic today. What I'll do is we'll just introduce ourselves. I'll give you 3 or 4 slides just to kind of set up technology trends and some of the topics for discussion, and then we'll talk about the intersection of how technology is evolving the advisor's practice and what we mean by holistic advice and how they might interact. We'll have 10 minutes or so at the end for Q&A. We don't have microphones in the audience, so just raise your hand and I'll call on you, and I'll probably repeat what you say or paraphrase what you say, and then we'll take it from there. Again, thanks for coming, and we'll just get started. All right, I think these are not in the same order that you're sitting, but how about if you start off, Matt?
Sure. Matt Schulte, Senior Vice President with eMoney Advisor. Been with eMoney since its inception back in 2000, from 8 people to where we are today. Hoping to share some things that we're observing about the marketplace and some of the different feedback that we get that go into why we choose to build what we build to help advisors improve their practices.
I'm James Carney. I'm head of By All Accounts. Morningstar acquired By All Accounts last year. By All Accounts is a data aggregation firm, and we serve well over 2,000 different advisory firms in the United States as well as overseas.
Good morning. My name is Adam Zuercher. I have a small RIA firm in Findlay, Ohio. We have about 70 million of assets under management, serve around 180 families, and we are a fee-only firm, and I hope to address the topic from the advisor's perspective.
Thank you. So in terms of bringing these 2 trends together, we've got this diagram which we call the total advisor workflow, ranging from client onboarding and profiling to investment management all the way through to financial planning and reporting. And so it's probably no secret to you that there's a lot to do and maybe not enough time to do it. So we'll come back to this concept of the whole workflow or the whole day in the life of an advisor related to technology in 3 more slides. You know, we know that most of the attendees at our conference are independent advisors. Good for you, you're taking market share. I have a question, or I framed it in brackets here as a hypothesis. Do smaller firms have different issues or different challenges with leveraging technology than bigger firms? So we might talk through some of that in terms of how having defined holistic advice, how does technology enable it, how does that affect different size firms? You know, one other observation is that the average AUM for independent firms is smaller than bigger firms. So to me that, again, leads to this question of scaling the business one way or another. So those 3 blue dots represent what we would call the independent channel. And we'll hear some anecdotes about how different firms who've embraced technology can scale their business. You know, one of the touch points for holistic advice, which we'll talk about, is kind of an industry trend, talking more to the investor's goals, goals-based planning, financial planning, versus a traditional investment focus. And so we highlight here the market for investment planning software, which this is for the whole industry, including the larger firms. There's lots of solid players, and it's something that Morningstar is approaching from the point of view of how do we partner with firms to enable more. You know, our expertise is traditionally on the investment side. But so the question is, what are the choices that you make as an advisory firm to adopt these types of platforms, financial planning being one of the many slices of this wheel. And so to tee off the conversation, imagine there are technology providers piecemeal out there today. Imagine stitching something together that allows you to more efficiently navigate this whole process, whether you're insourcing or outsourcing different parts of it. So that's what we're teeing up here as the topic for holistic advice. I'll ask each member of the panel to give their thoughts on defining what they mean by or what they think of as holistic advice, and we'll go from there. For me, it's about zooming out and taking in more information about the investor to provide more well-rounded set of recommendations. But maybe Adam, you'll start, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I think the way I see holistic advice is just really looking at all that's important to the client. And so when we onboard a client, we spend a significant amount of time, usually several meetings, talking to them about, you know, what they hope to accomplish, what their goals are, and taking it beyond just the portfolio management, just the investment management, but you know, understanding what they want to accomplish with their money, why are they investing in the first place, and how that impacts, you know, not just the portfolio, but also their estate planning, and you know, do they want to do things for their children, their grandchildren, and we want to see it, you know, I look at it as the big picture, and just helping clients get from where they are today to where they want to be in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would reiterate most of that, and I think the only thing I would add would be, and then to be able to do all that, you need all the information, right? If you don't have all the information and you're doing all those great things, but you're missing pieces, then you're missing something in your overall plan. So it's having all the information as well as providing all the services that you were talking about to really give holistic advice.
All right. Again, I'll repeat a little bit of what was said. I think from a financial planning standpoint, the words that we think of are complete, comprehensive. When you change one thing, it impacts other things, and you need to be aware of those other things and not just deal in a silo if you're looking at things from a holistic standpoint. But at eMoney, we think that technology actually enables firms and advisors to kind of extend that definition into their whole practice. Looking at you know, really organizing a client's entire financial life. If you want to be that first phone call, if you want to be that coach, if you will, you need to have all the information. But like the other folks up here said, we've actually started to use a term, information under management. I mean, if you're not thinking about all the information that you have, or you should have, to be able to answer the questions, even if it's not your area of expertise, you're going to go out, you're going to find that expertise and bring it in to answer the question. But you need to be that gatekeeper. You need to be, from a holistic standpoint, the one who doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but has all the information, just as the other folks said.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that segues into aggregation, which I think folks in the audience are probably familiar with what it is. But James, I know you have some thoughts about how your clients are using it beyond, let's say, that snapshot or onboarding process.
Yeah, I think we're in phase 2 of data aggregation now. Phase 1 was let's get the information, put it up so everybody can see everything. But now you're into a situation saying, now I have the information, what can I do with it? How do I make it actionable for either my client or my firm or whatever? And that's really where folks are really getting real value out of the technology, right? Technology is just that. It's technology. It's not the advice itself. That's got to come from you folks. But it's providing the tools so you can extract that information much more easily versus I have to figure it all out. I have all this data, but then I have to spend all the time figuring it out. And that's what people are changing now. So we have good examples of clients that are using aggregation for part of their proposal generation. So when they get a client, even for a proposal, they're building that, they're aggregating the data as part of the proposal right up front. And then if they stay as a client, they automatically have the information, they go forward with it. Or they're taking the data, now they're saying, yeah, it's one thing to be able to say, okay, I can see all the retirement accounts and I can do my balancing, rebalancing, and allocations, and that's really actionable. But then the other thing is to look at some of these investments and to say, geez, you've got this account over here, and the performance of it is this. It's not meeting our goals. So it's not meeting the goals that you were talking about. So now we should talk about, should we make a change? And we have a large firm that's a client of ours that I think it was over 24 months, they moved almost $2 billion from different assets to other assets because of some of those reasons. So it's becoming much more actionable, which is more useful.
Yeah, I'll dovetail right off of that. I believe that one of the most critical pieces of technology that any firm should make sure that they have is account aggregation. We've been involved in it since 2000. As it's evolved, it's gotten better over the years. It is, again, some of the terms we like to use are, if you are not aggregating, you will be aggregated. And that's doesn't necessarily put you in a good position. It helps from a planning standpoint for obvious reasons. From a data gathering standpoint, you don't need to go out and gather information and refresh that as often, you or your staff. But also, just importantly, from a touch standpoint, using, just as you were saying, using the data, not just displaying the data, using it, whether it's analytics and benchmarking, or whether you're using the data in some other way, having it available just makes you that much more well-rounded.
Sounds to me, at first blush, it sounds like information overload is a risk when you bring all this stuff on board. But so the useful integration of that information into the advisory process is key. I had a question, and from our prior conversations, if we define technology broadly as new and better ways of doing things, not just, let's say, a specific kind of software definition of technology, that potentially frees you up for more other activities. Do either of you have anecdotes, or any of you have anecdotes about how either in your own practice or clients of yours have gained, let's say, from adopting these sorts of solutions, which is itself, I'm assuming, a big project?
Well, I think I have two. One I just thought of, and we hadn't talked about this prior, but we switched to Morningstar Office back in 2011, 4 years ago, and it saved a lot of time from a quarterly standpoint, producing quarterly reports, doing billing. And we took the process down from a 4-day process to about 4 hours. So that was a tremendous improvement in our practice. The other one is our CRM software. So we'd been using an older software that helped us do a great job at looking at a client's situation holistically, but the problem was it wasn't keeping up with technology. We didn't have mobile applications. We had to have desktop versions only, and we needed to update. So we recently went through a process where we bid out a new CRM provider, and we went through a pretty thorough process where we had a list of 30 features that we thought would be important in a CRM solution. Our team, we then scored those features on a 1 to 3 scale. Number 1 being it would be nice to have. Number 2, it's an important feature. Number 3, it's a critical feature. We have to have it to run our business efficiently. And I think 17 out of those 30 had a 3. So then we went through and we set up a trial and a demo with 3 different providers, and we basically scored them on a scale of 1 to 10 for each feature. And we came up with, a systematic way of confirming what we thought was already the best solution. So we're in the process of doing this now, but we believe it's going to save us a lot of time. We're going to be able to automate a lot more of our processes and our workflows. And so I think, for us, if we're going to adopt new technology, it has to save us some time, or it has to save the client some time. I think clients are looking for advisors that can, make things convenient for them, save them time. We want to enhance the client experience, and that's the other thing our CRM software allows us to do is really, take detailed notes on our experience with the client, keep track of everything we have to do. And without that piece of software, to us, that's the most important piece of software, other than the portfolio management and financial planning. Those 3 are really the key to our practice.
So it sounds like you got about a week, a month back. What do you do with that? What is that? Is that going out and getting more clients, doing more with your existing?
Yeah, it's enabled us to scale our business and serve more clients. I mean, that's really what I would like to accomplish. Anytime we can, add software that saves us time, then we would like to be able to, open the doors to accepting new client relationships.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all that. And I think also what's changing is not only is the technology changing and what we provide and so forth, but the investors are changing, the consumers are changing, and the demands that they now have are growing, because look at all the technology they have at their fingertips. I can go to Bank of America and I can aggregate all my accounts, but yet my advisory firm can't. You know, I don't get it. And so that's just one piece, but they're getting more sophisticated. They want more interaction, right, with their advisor. And so all those things, the technology is just the enabler, right? The advisor still provides all that real knowledge. And I think the models are changing as you know, we hear about, whether it's fee-based or flat fee or whatever. The one thing that I suspect will happen is that over time there will be more margin pressure on folks, and so efficiency is critical both from an operational standpoint as well as client service, which is what, you know, is driving you folks.
You mentioned mobile, and I think you mentioned changing the model. We have this conversation at Morningstar about how the collaboration model could be influenced by technology. So we talked earlier about how aggregation gets you more view into a client's portfolios also over time, but the client benefits from that too, right? They see the big picture, they see how you're interacting with that. Have you guys got any anecdotes about firms, let's say, embracing this and changing the way they actually do their practice? That is to say, maybe leveraging the technology to engage with their clients.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that collaboration is something that everybody has to get used to. Their clients not only are willing to do it, in some cases it's their preferred way of engaging their advisor is remotely or through different types of technology. So I think, you know, especially as they get younger, you need to be able to engage them in things that they're familiar with. The innovation is coming from the Googles and those types of firms out there. As James mentioned, they have better technology oftentimes than the advisor, and you need to be able to relate to them and communicate with them and advise them in an environment that they're comfortable and they're used to doing in other aspects of their life.
Yeah, and I think I was just going to say one thing. I was talking with a number of firms. You know, I talked with a number of our firms over the months and weeks and whatever, and there were a couple that really stood out. There's two firms. There's one principal, and that's it. And one was managing like $250 million, and one was managing $350 million. Now, obviously, they're focusing on large clients and so forth. But what was fascinating is everything has been, all the technology has been outsourced, so that they outsource as much as they can. The operational efficiency is so high that, like I said, one of them has a part-time person to help them out, but one of them uses the Morningstar back office services and does everything. Another one uses another vendor. But I'm not saying that everyone will fall into that model, but the model of efficiency is really going forward.
Well, and let me just mention, because you kind of started off with this from an integration standpoint. I mean, there's obviously a lot of integrations between different providers out there going on, but I guess one thing that we see is there are integrations and then there are real integrations, things that actually provide value and deliver efficiencies. If you're simply providing me an ability to link in or single sign-on in without kind of the corresponding actions happening. I mean, you need to be able to perform your function in another tool, or you need to be able to replicate something from another tool into yours. It can't just be a link that, okay, I hopped into that tool. So really thoroughly investigating technologies and how they're integrated and some of the particulars of those integrations just to validate, because everything's labeled an integration and you just need to go in and understand whether that's actually going to move the needle inside of your business or not.
Yeah, we imagine, again, this is imagining the solution, let's say 10 years from now that might be in your office. You onboard a client, you've got their goals and so on. That information doesn't then just sit in an archive somewhere. It travels through, right? And you're using it on your statements, and it's coming back to the measurement towards the goal and so on. That's, I think, what we're pointing towards. You know, James, you mentioned how investors are used to technology enabling this stuff, and you know, there's been some buzz, obviously, lately about Robo advisors, you know, coming into the market. How do you see the technology that those folks are using helping you? as opposed to, you know, this idea of maybe being lapped.
What I see with the Robo advisors is they have some really nice platforms. So I've looked at some of those, and I think people want the technology that they've built, and you know, they've started by trying to really disrupt the industry and how things are delivered. So I think it's a good thing for the industry because it is going to enhance the client experience. I think some advisors may feel threatened, but because, you know, what they're doing is, or the view is that they are commoditizing investment management by offering these automated, passively managed portfolios. I don't believe you can automate the entire advisory experience. And so I think there's the human element that needs to be added onto that piece. And I think that's where, you know, we as a small firm, we look at that and we say that technology is great. We would like to have that combined with what we do. So we'd like to add the Robo piece and the software that they have. You know, there's a term I heard recently called the bionic advisor. We were talking about that earlier, but that's where we combine the human element and the Robo element. I think that's the way of the future, and there is a firm that I've seen that's doing that very well, and I think that's how, if there's a way that we can get that technology so that it's cost effective for the smaller firm to implement, and it integrates everything, and we're able to do a better job, take the client experience to a deeper level, because I think they're going to come to expect that. Everything you do, you can do it on demand. They want to see their accounts anytime. They want to be able to contact their advisor at any time.
Yeah, I would agree that I think the Robo advisors in many respects are a great thing because they're pushing the different usage of technology. And so Robo advisors, it's not a market unto themselves, it's really a technology, right? But it's done a lot of good things. It makes people think, makes other vendors think, and ultimately the advisory space is going to win from it. At the same token, I was at a conference 2 weeks ago that there was a big study done by Carney, and it was interesting, and they said what's going to happen in the future. So their prediction was this. They said that while the robo-advisors will grow, over 50% of those dollars coming in are dollars that aren't in the market today. So they're not with an advisor, they're not, you know, even in the market, they're in money market accounts, right? Another 30% to 40%, 30+% were going to be people that are already self-directed, right? And so there's very little left that was a real impact to advisory firms, right? That was, and I thought it was fascinating. They went through all, and they did this huge survey of individual investors, 1,000+ people. So it wasn't just that they sat in a room. And so it really kind of proves your point out that people still want the human contact. There's clearly groups of people. On the other hand, there are other groups of people that are okay without it, and they only want this level of service. So to embrace the best of both, to your point, is I think where advisors have the most to gain.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, you know, we very much are looking at the consumer-oriented tools, the robos, as a yardstick by which we measure some of our own client experience tools. I mean, I think you have to. There is some obvious engaging user interface and simplicity to their designs that you have to be able to replicate. It goes back to what I was saying before about, you know, that's where technology innovates, and advisors, unfortunately, you know, are dealing on the back end of that. Those direct-to-consumer tools don't have to deal with compliance. They don't have to deal with other things that may get in the way, whether you're, you know, nowadays there's a big push with, you know, with FINRA, for example, with consolidated reporting. Well, that, you know, that gets in the way of other technologies being able to deliver some of those same things. So that's a challenge, but it absolutely is I think, a barometer that any technology provider for advisors who are building client tools needs to be aware of, needs to be on top of, so that they're offering something competitive and comparable.
I like this idea that robo-advisors are growing the market,
Right.
and then you know, what we're the spark there is that client experience, easy onboarding. We've had conversations with folks who see it as maybe a way to manage. Let's say you had a similar client portal, for your advisees. It's a way of managing sort of prospecting, managing a slice of your practice, kids, others, et cetera. So that's an example of how this integration could come to pass. I think the heart of the matter here is how technology can change the value proposition. What's an advisor holding themselves out as providing? There's no one answer. I've had hundreds of conversations with folks about this, but I really think that that's what's being impacted by technology, is that certain things have gotten cheaper, free, or easier to do. So people have to focus on how they add value, how they charge for value, and so on. So again, I'll come out and say it. I think that's the heart of the matter, and I'm going to get each of you talking about it.
Well, I think technology enables us to serve our clients more thoroughly. So everything we do, we want to try to, if we're going to innovate and try to change how we do things, we want to take technology and enhance the client process. So what can we do to make the process easier, simpler, faster? And I think we're going to have to. Over the next 10 years, there's going to be exponential change in technology. And if we're not using it and embracing the change, then we're going to be left behind. One thing that I think of is just the way it helps us. It's our digital brain, so it helps us to serve clients at a deep level. We can set up different types of alerts to alert us when there's something going on in the client portfolio or changes in their life. Reminders so that we can do something nice for them on special events, special occasions, send out a surprise and delight gift, we call it. So things like that. Really something a computer can't do alone, but combine that with the human element, and we can really deliver a wow experience to our clients.
Yeah, I think technology is driving advisors in a lot of what we've talked about already to gather more information and do things more holistically. And so it may be converting some folks to more of an organizer, more of a coach, more of kind of a big picture, complete picture type of practice or advising. That's a ball that's rolling downhill. I don't think we're going to see anything change about that, and that's going to be the new normal.
Yeah, I think clearly people want advice, right? They absolutely want advice, and so I don't think that's going to change. And we're talking about how it's delivered and how we have access to it, and most of that is around, either greater information that we can make more actionable, optimization as far as the way we deliver costs and so forth. But I think ultimately, every firm has to come up with a strategy, right? Because if you don't have a strategy, you don't know where you're going. And so I'm sure you developed that strategy, which is what set you on this path. And then without that, you wouldn't be where you are.
The anecdote you shared about the single proprietor who's obviously got a successful practice, can you summarize? Let's say, how does that person parlay there, or what does they have written on the shingle out front, so to speak?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I spent some time talking with one of them in detail because I really wanted to understand. And the benefit was they were starting new, so they had no legacy to deal with. So they could build everything exactly the way they wanted it from day one. And they had been in a larger firm, so they had experience. And they made the decision that the technology was far enough along that it could be leveraged, and if it was put together in the right fashion with the right kind of support behind it, they could grow their business without lots of staff. And they had a very focused market, and so all those things were in play, but that allowed this person to literally grow his business, and it started small, didn't start at 200 million or whatever, it started at 10. But over 3 or 4 years, it grew quite quickly because he could offer the level of service and all the kind of the operational involvement was done by others. And that was his strategy, and that may not make sense for every firm, but that has made sense for him. And even going forward, he still has that same thought that if I can't get the efficiency about it, then I'm doing something wrong.
And this is a service offering that's high touch.
That's right.
Let's call it holistic.
This is high touch. These are clients with 10 million or more. So these are high touch clients, but he's been able to do that, and he spends his time with clients. And so much of the other things are automated that it allows him to do that, and I suspect he'll probably have to add a person at some point. But he's done a heck of a job to get where he is, and he continues to grow.
I was just going to say, what we've seen over the years is the technology enabling, in particular the smaller firms, to really give the impression to clients of a much larger infrastructure than they might actually have at the end of the day. Whether you're talking about aggregation or some of the alerts and triggers that can be set so that I know when something moves, I can pick up the phone and place that phone call. There really is, at times, an appearance that there's a lot of different folks watching over a particular portfolio or a given plan, and the technology is what's enabling that.
So that's almost my hypothesis is disproven in the sense that small firms may even have an advantage in terms of putting these solutions together by outsourcing more aggressively than some of the bigger firms who own that infrastructure and are kind of tied up with these larger programs. Any other perspective?
Well, just as we were talking, I was just thinking about technology, and one piece we haven't touched on what it can do for an advisory firm is it's really helped us from a marketing standpoint as well. I mean, we've done things like webinars, so we've used technology to expand our reach beyond just our local geographic area. So it's something we're looking to do more of because we're in a smaller town, smaller community, and we want to build more of a wider presence across our state, and we can do that using technology. I have clients that I've never met in person. We use things like GoToMeeting, Skype, screen sharing software where I can communicate with them on the phone, on the internet, and share presentations online. And I'm able to do the same level, give them the same level of advice as I would face-to-face.
That's great.
I think one of the things that you just reiterated is that what the precious thing for everybody is time, right? Yeah. And to spend time doing some of the things we would in the past, we don't want to do that anymore if we don't have to.
Yeah, I have clients that will, even though they're local, they'll schedule a call and we'll do an online meeting where I can share my screen with them rather than driving into the office and coming in. It saves them time. We can do it at their convenience.
That's great.
And as I mentioned earlier, I think that is becoming kind of a preferred way for a lot of folks to do business. They're used to doing that when they're getting service on their cable or whatever else, and so they're that much more comfortable dealing in an environment like that.
And you might even think of it as more touch points versus fewer.
Right.
I'd like to open it up to the audience for some questions. We don't have microphones, so if you'll just raise your hand, I'll call on you. I'll kind of sweep the room, and I'll probably repeat what you say for the rest of the room, and we'll go from there. Any questions or comments?
Well, you begged the question after studying all the different CRMs, which did you end up selecting?
The question was which CRM you ended up with.
We chose Redtail. Redtail scored the highest with our quantitative system that we went through, and also had a lot of integrations with other systems and softwares that we use. And they've launched a new version that we think looks very nice, and we did trial and tested a lot of different things, and it definitely improves everything we're able to do.
I had a follow-up for you. You mentioned those factors that scored a 3, the must-haves. What were some of the biggest drivers of the criteria? Even putting aside who the vendors were.
Well, I mean, one right out of the gate was it must have a mobile application that I could pull up a client record from anywhere. Just to give an example, a year ago or so during the winter, we had a snowstorm. I live 20 minutes from the office. Everything in the county was shut down, and we weren't supposed to be on the roads. And I had a client appointment that day. You know, I assumed they wouldn't be coming in, but I wanted to call them to confirm, and I didn't have their number in my contacts. And so I had to go. You know, it was difficult to get their number to call them. But if I would have had that app, you know, and just pull that up, that's a simple example. But, you know, just while I'm at a conference, I can pull up records on any clients. I can see what's happening in the office, you know, what tasks are being completed, what other people on our team are working on.
One in the middle here.
Say one of our biggest frustrations is with the companies communicating with each other. And so I kind of find it ironic that, like, as data aggregators, you're asking all these financial institutions or whatever to give you access to all their information, but you won't share information with, like, Salesforce or CRMs or Morningstar. And so, like, we have to key this stuff 3 or 4 times, and it's absurd. You know, so, like, is that something that you're working on that we're going to be able to do to, like, get our planning data out of Salesforce into eMoney or, you know, into Office or what? So does that make sense?
It does. I mean, we at eMoney, we certainly believe in choice. We've launched the choice platform, and the idea is whether it's Redtail, whether it's Zuercher, whether it's Salesforce, you know, we want to bring all that data in and allow the same level of integration. At the end of the day, you know, you have to have cooperating parties from both ends, not just one willing participant. So we've been having those conversations, and I certainly expect something to be coming in that regard, specifically to Salesforce. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, Nick,
Let me just interrupt.
Yep.
The question was, what's the progress on information sharing between providers, integration between providers,
Right.
to avoid having to rekey information?
Integrated more.
Yeah.
You know, now WealthFinder's going to come up there and Tim Step, and you got Payo, and you got Morningstar Office, and you got this, and everything, tons of different times, and it shouldn't be that way.
it absolutely shouldn't be that way. But again, I think that when it comes to looking at integrations, I think that you don't want folks, you don't want to deal with folks who are only dealing with a single portfolio management tool, a single CRM. I think you want to make sure that you're looking at technology that has multiple integrations, so that you can really come in and not have to change one or more of those platforms. You come in with what you've decided is best of breed for your firm, so choice there is critical.
I would just add one thing. One of the things that we're just started on is taking data from other systems and putting it to other systems, because we know data, right? So we might, for example, we'll take data from Orion and put it into Advisor Workstation or Morningstar Office and so forth. So it's something that we're using our technology to start doing, because we're in a good position to do that, because we're neutral and we just focus on data. So we're actually, I think there are some opportunities and things that will occur that will make that easier for you.
I know that Redtail integrates with a bunch of other systems, including Office and so on. So it's something I think to demand from your providers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that when we were doing the CRM search, a lot of them advertised integrations, and the question was, well, what does that really mean?
Right.
Because my idea of an integration is everything syncs together. So if I'm in Redtail, I can see, you know, that'll sync then with, say, you know, our financial planning software or with Morningstar Office, and I can pull up their accounts right in Redtail without having to go into Morningstar Office. Or, you know, one that we use is Riskalyze for client risk analysis, and Redtail had an integration with Riskalyze, so that was nice.
I think maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but providers think differently today than they did 5 or 10 years ago about the idea of integration. It might have been the case at one point that people wanted to be that place where the advisor spends their whole day, but now the firms are talking to each other in different ways about sharing that.
Yeah. Bi-directional versus it was always one way.
One push, or
Yeah, versus now it's becoming more bi-directional, which is what you're asking for.
And again, I think that's directly related to advisors basically demanding it, going to those providers and saying, you need to share this information. I can't operate without these things being bidirectional.
Great.
Yeah, I
Fascinating question, the million-dollar question. How does an advisory firm set its strategy? You could be pulled in different directions by your vendors. They might have recommendations and so on. I'm happy to open this one up. Maybe you could talk about how you guys have focused, and we'll talk about it.
I think it's a big challenge. I think, being a smaller firm, we have limited resources to spend on technology, limited time. So once we engage with a certain technology, then we're committed to that to some degree for a while, and you don't know what's coming next. And so, you're at risk of having to change again in 2 years. For us, I think, again, we just go back to the strategy of, enhancing the client experience, saving time for our advisors, improving the process, and look at, are we going to get a return on investment? So saving 4 days of time with our quarterly reports, we're able to add new clients. It certainly was a return on our investment. I don't know that we have a real good answer to your question. It's just definitely a challenge.
Well, and I'll just add that from a strategy standpoint, what we encourage folks to do, again, because there's a lot of tools out there that are very broad, that have a lot of different things. Focus on what you think is going to make the biggest impact initially. A lot of folks and firms get frustrated because they attempt to implement everything from day one, and that becomes overwhelming, and that becomes something that just, self-fulfilling prophecy, it creates problems. So you can focus on a couple of features that you think are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck, and then you gradually dip your toe into those other things as you get more and more comfortable with it. Because again, so many of these things are very, very broad and have a lot of different characteristics, and you feel shortchanged if you aren't attempting to utilize everything from day one, and that just may not be practical.
I would offer that I think it's important to distinguish between technology and strategy. So a technology strategy might be which items will we tackle in what order, and what do we expect to get from those. Mm-hmm. But that comes from the strategy of the practice or the firm. Right. So you are serving folks online, in and outside of your geographic region. There might be other. You talked about marketing to high net worth households. So those are niches or decisions that are the firm strategy. The technology has to be in service of that, which is easier said than done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great.
All right, we'll one more here, and then we'll loop back.
So you guys have mentioned integration. Have you guys considered any in-house integration, maybe like programming or something? Where do you see that going?
So the question is whether we've considered in-house integrations within an advisory firm. Is that your question? And where's that going? It's an interesting question. I don't know if
I've had a fair amount of experience, and in general, people would prefer not to do in-house integration, because doing it is one thing, but then having to maintain it and enhance it, all of a sudden you start being a software company, and that's probably not a good thing for most firms. I was just at a firm a couple months ago that built a bunch of their own software. Now they're trying to figure out how to undo it, because the person that built it was leaving, moving to California, and then it's just, I think in most cases, it's probably not a great idea. There may be certain things that may be built, tiny little pieces that may be fine, that don't have high risk, but I think in general, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think it's funny, actually. I'm reading this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, which is where I got that definition of technology, just a new and better way to do things. He talks about how a good idea is one that can scale. So the question is, if an advisory firm is doing some piece of that technology in-house, will it help them scale? I would ask the question, is it something that your firm has got special sauce in? If it's a billing and reporting system, there's probably someone who can do that better for you. If it's your wealth forecasting or your goals algorithm, that might be a different story if you've got some IP in there. Just food for thought. Any other comments?
I mean, years ago, I had that thought. I had visions of what technology could do, and thought we should just, build it in-house, hire a programmer to build what we want to do. But now, as technology and progress has happened over the past few years, I don't envision doing that. I think there's too many other people that are focused just on that, and I think you'll build something, and like you said, you'll be wanting to undo it in 5 years. And that's what our prior CRM system was. It was an RIA firm that wasn't satisfied with any system that was out there. It was created probably 15 years ago. He developed it, created it, and then used it in his practice and then sold it to other advisors. But now he's having trouble keeping up. They tried to launch a cloud version and it's not going so well. So that's the trouble I think you can run into.
Way out on the corner there.
Talk to us about eMoney with the purchase or before the purchase from Fidelity. Where do you see eMoney going in the next few years? What are the 3 to 5 trends that you see you guys rolling out that are going to be major changes for RIA firms using eMoney?
Question about how the Fidelity relationship impacts eMoney's business.
Sure. It's still relatively new and fresh, and the good thing is that all messaging is that we're going to be able to continue to operate as we always have. What we're going to be able to benefit from is increased resources and capital to take what is hopefully a 5-year roadmap and turn that into a 2-year roadmap. Some of the things that we're looking to continue to build on is, again, we've had a long-standing client experience and portal, but that's going to continue to evolve and grow. More and more features available from a configuration or option basis with advisors to use with their end clients. When it comes to RIAs or even broker-dealers or other firms, we hope to be getting into a lot more tools that help with what was talked about a little bit earlier, and that's doing analytics across the board, using the aggregation, using the holistic data gathering, and really being able to provide the firm with well-rounded information that allows them to do some opportunity reporting, for lack of a better term, or things like that. And then, from a financial planning standpoint, those will continue to evolve, really keying on interactive types of tools. Again, we're firm believers that the pad and the binder full of the reports are a little bit a thing of the past, and that more and more clients are looking to engage in the process. They look at it like they're helping design their home. They're feeling a part of the process if they can interact with the advisor and try this and try that. So more and more tools that allow for collaboration and interaction from a planning standpoint.
You touched on something that I think is something that spills out of adopting technology for the holistic practices. At Morningstar we call it business intelligence. So you talked about technology enabling you to reach out to clients at certain moments. Things change in the portfolio or in their life and so on. You can take this data and pivot it on your practice, right? Well, who are my biggest accounts, fastest growing accounts, at risk, whatever. If you have a big team, you manage books and even branch offices, whatever. And that might tie back to the strategy question, is what's the technology that will enable me to hone in on what's driving value in my firm? Are there different segments of my clients that I didn't know, or where am I spending 80% or 20% of my time? So this integration of that data has payoffs for the advisory practice in its own right.
Absolutely.
Almost is it fair to call it a freebie? Sort of like once you have all the data in there, you
Yeah, I mean, it's there, letting the technology do what it's there to do, and you can create those analytics or those views of the data that allow you to make strategic decisions or optimal decisions in a real-time basis. These things aren't happening 30 days later or a quarter later. You're actually able to do it in close to real time.
And I think the other thing that's going forward, which a lot of firms are looking at, is kind of the behavioral analytics. Right, so I have multiple advisors, and they kind of have the same products, but they do different things. So when I have lots of, what's the right model? How do I monitor that? How do I get people to behave the way that we really want to as a firm? And so that's kind of the next stage that, just embarking on now.
Which I'll throw out there also ties into behavioral research Morningstar is doing. We acquired Hello Wallet last year, which has a great experience for individuals to get their sort of budgeting in order and so on. But a lot of their research relates to what are messages that investors respond to. It could be little things like you paid an ATM fee last week. did you know that you might be spending whatever 2% of your cash budget on ATM fees? Little nudges like that. You're talking about in the context of a practice. Here's an advisor who might not be applying the methodology we want or whatever. But investors, when and why would I engage around the plan, around retirement, whatever? Those are things that also then come up out of the data where you can, let's say, profile or identify patterns to guide the conversation. It's cool stuff. More questions, comments?
Yeah, on the budgeting topic, I used eMoney years ago, but I just felt like it's a lot of maintenance because the passwords would get stale and so forth. Morningstar Office has been our hub of late, but we're having a challenge with the custody of usernames and passwords when it comes to budgeting and wanting to use Mint, but Mint doesn't want financial advisors using it. But I've heard eMoney has a solution. Is that true when it comes to budgeting?
Yeah, I mean, we will aggregate credit cards and checking accounts, that type of thing. And part of that process is pulling in the transactions and we allow you to do budgeting and cash flow around those transactions. So it's a view for the client. The client brings it in through the client experience, so they're not handing over their password to an advisor to get access to that data. And then you've also got the ability for the client can decide whether they want to expose some of that detailed transaction data to the advisor or not. So if they'd like to keep that private, they can. If I don't necessarily want my advisor to know I bought 3 drivers last month, so I can choose to turn some of that on and off based on their comfort level.
And in that case, passwords are self-managed by the client. Does that answer your question? Go for it.
I've got clients that, a decade, a couple decades, and we use them quicker. Does anybody have anything that somehow integrates client account?
Question is whether there's a Quicken integration.
Yes, there is. Quicken typically takes things in the OFX format, and so that could either be taken in directly, like my spreadsheet side, or if the clients have already set those accounts up in Quicken, they would probably have to reset them up, and for an eMoney or somebody else to pull that in. But yes, it would take that data in one or two ways.
Anyone over here?
We're very familiar with eMoney. We have not used Morningstar Office. I'm wondering if, I'm thinking from the advisor side, it's one thing, but from the client experience side, thinking from their point of view, has anyone found it to be a disadvantage if a client has an experience with more than one piece of software? And I'm not even sure Morningstar Office is used in that way, but if we say to the client, here's eMoney, we're going to eat, sleep, breathe eMoney now, come with me, and they do it, right? But then we've got quarterly reports going on over here in Morningstar Office. Is it perceived as, does anyone know if a client perceives that as a negative if we're using two different tools to do two different things? Or is one goal for some point in the future to have the client only have to use one piece of software, one portal, one experience, one, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Just trying to
How important is this idea of integration to the end investor?
Or even one tool.
One tool.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's somewhat situational, but I think most clients would feel that there's either an unnecessary redundancy or it doesn't make sense for me to be logging into two places. We've started to do some of those integrations. For example, we have one with Orion where we're bringing the reports and we're automating the quarterly reports, and they end up right in our vault in the client experience. So I think that's what we're pushing for with our more recent integrations with performance reporting companies in particular.
An advisor could in theory do that with the eMoney vault for any type of quarterly report, right? You can upload the...
Oh, you can yes, an advisor can always upload. What we're trying to do is automate some of that. So if I've already got that defined in another tool, that's what I was talking about, real integrations versus just fake integrations. If you're actually performing something like that. So if I've got a routine set up in another tool that generates those reports, why can't they also secondarily deposit them in a few other places if it makes sense. To your point, from a client standpoint, they only want to go into one place. We've seen that a lot with financial planning tools as well. If you log in to access a plan, that's really the only aspect that you're looking at there. If you've got a more comprehensive, holistic view of a client experience, those things should be integrated and bringing them into a single environment.
Yeah, I would say people want one experience. And whether you are using multiple tools to get them there, that may be the case, but they want one experience. They don't need to have it more complicated than that.
Is Redtail offering you that for the client portal, or is that something else?
No, we if they are, I haven't discovered it yet, but we haven't fully converted to Redtail yet.
Okay.
The process starts this week, but no, we're kind of piecing things together, and that's where, I look at the chart up there of imagine a technology solution that does all of the following, and I think that's what we're talking about, where it is one end user experience for the client. I think that is a great vision for the future.
Thank you. We got 5 minutes. I'll take one more.
Building off of that, it's one thing to have a client login and a static report in that login. It's another to have true integration and be able to have the client log into their Morningstar office and have a seamless sign-on then to the financial planning platform or the CRM platform and be able to work with that data. Are you headed there?
Did you want to?
Oh, sure. So beyond, let's say, quarterly reports being integrated, what about live data, interactive data from the system for the client, for the end investor?
Right. So being able to massage that financial planning data, being able to not just statically view something,
Right.
but
Sure.
work with it.
I think this ties back to the collaboration model. So the client is potentially updating goals or whatever
Right.
voluntarily.
Well,
Are we going there?
I think we absolutely are, and I think it's a lot from one of your earlier questions about the influence that direct-to-consumer tools might be impacting. They're able to go in there and play around. We've got some different tools that allow them to change the data, push it over to the advisor side, that allow them to go through some what we call workshops that enable them to define certain parameters and do some what-ifing and actually engage the data, not just have a static view and look. So I see that evolving and improving off of what's there today.
I mean, that's the thing about the Robo advisors, right? You can go to a lot of these and you can do that. You can do the what ifs and changing this and whatever, and there's no reason why a client should not be able to do that with an advisor solution. And not all the solutions are there yet.
Yeah, definitely coming. One more.
Regarding the last two questions, what advisors are really asking, what they want, is what you were talking about earlier on the advisor dashboard. What they're really saying is they want one integrated portal on the client side that gives the same kind of functionality you're providing on the advisor side. And so the question is anybody doing that yet?
Question, is anyone building the all-in-one client portal that is equivalent to what we're talking about the advisor having access to?
To be able to integrate those elements for the client, just like they do with the advisor.
I think there are some firms out there that are further along than others, that are independent firms. Some of the newer firms, some smaller and newer firms that are building that are not tied to any specific application. So I think it's still early yet, and they're on their way, but there's not any mainstream application that does that today that I know of.
I'm looking for some of my colleagues in the audience. I think it's fair for me to say that it is on Morningstar's roadmap
Yes.
to provide
Yes.
a robust client
Yep.
portal
That's right.
with the benefits of the integration
That's
that we've
right.
been talking about here today.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to thank you all in the audience for your participation and attention. Thank you very much for making the trip and joining our conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day and the conference.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.